And we are back live on air. On a special good morning to you, our viewers this morning, residents of St. Lucia, and those watching from the diaspora. A sitting of the House of Assembly is scheduled for this morning, with papers to be laid by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs and the Public Service, and the Honorable Minister for Tourism, Information and Broadcasting, Culture and the Creative Industries. Carlton, quite a few motions down for consideration this morning. We see a motion making a petition to borrow an amount not exceeding the equivalent of $7,945,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank's ordinary capital resources to finance the Millennium Highway and West Coast Reconstruction Project.
Definitely.
We also see Parliament by another petition from Parliament that Parliament by affirmative resolution approved the draft value-added tax. That's the rate of tax on goods and services provided by hotels and other providers in the tourism sector. We're seeing the resumption of tourism activity with the reopening of our borders as of this week, June 4th. And so that motion being tabled as well. And the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 2 order to amend Schedule 2 of the Act is to set the rate of tax for goods and services provided by hotels and other providers in the tourism sector as follows. The rate of 7% tax applies with regard to a supply of accommodation service, a water sports service, a tour conducted by land, air, or sea within St. Lucia. Okay, and we see now the Speaker of the House is entering, and we are commencing the sitting of the House of Assembly at this point.
Let us pray.
Father in heaven, we give you praise, give you glory and honor. We thank you for your goodness upon us. We ask a small request from you, God, concerning our nation. We ask for your hands to remain upon us, that you would cover us in these difficult and challenging times. We also ask for your grace upon our children as they return back to school, that you would protect them, cover them with your blood, and let your hands be upon them. Almighty God, by whom alone King reigns, and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thy unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above to direct and guide us in all our consultation, and grant that we have the fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, partial affection, the result of all our consultation may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public will, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the united and knitted together of the heart of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Statements by ministers. But some of the prime ministers like this, would you not make a statement? Motions. Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth. job creation, external affairs, and the public service.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 391 of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that the Minister of Finance may, by resolution of Parliament, borrow money from a bank or other financial institution for capital expenditure for government. And whereas it is further provided under Section 42(1) of the said Act, that there shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund all debt charges for which the government is liable. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow an amount not exceeding the equivalent of US $7,945,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank's Ordinary Capital Resource, OCR, to finance the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road reconstruction project. And whereas the interest payable at a rate of 4.8% per annum on the amount of the loan withdrawn and outstanding. And whereas a commitment charge is payable at a rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the OCR portion withdrawn. And whereas the loan is repayable in 48 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each first day of January, first day of April, first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date immediately following the expiration of 5 years after the date of the loan agreement, or on a latter date that the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount not exceeding the equivalent of US $7,945,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank's Ordinary Capital Resources, OCR, to finance the Millennium Highway and West Coast project. Be it further resolved that the interest is payable at a rate of 4.8% per annum on the amount of the loan withdrawn and outstanding. The commitment charge is payable at a rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the OCR portion withdrawn. The loan is repayable in 48 equal, approximately equal, and consecutive quarterly installments on each the first day of January, the first day of April, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date immediately following the expiration of 5 years after the date of the loan agreement, or on a later due date that the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. So, Mr. Speaker, just to reinforce it, Section 39(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, the Act empowers the Minister of Finance to borrow money from a bank or other financial institution for the capital expenditure of government. In addition, Section 42(1) of the Act provides that all debt charges for which the government is liable is charged and paid out of the consolidated fund. The Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow an amount not exceeding $7,945,000 US from the Caribbean Development Bank to finance the Millennium Highway and West Coast reconstruction project. The project will increase efficiency, resilience, and road safety of the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road, and improve maintenance, management, and planning for the road sector in St. Lucia. The project has 7 components. The first is project preparation assistance, in which there will be consultancy services for the completion of a feasibility study, final designs, and bid documents. In the second component, there is a construction of a roundabout at the junction of the Millennium Highway, West Coast Road, and the East Coast Road, the cul-de-sac junction, as we know it, and at the reconstruction of the bridge at Ancillary. Infrastructure works is the third component of the project that entails the rehabilitation of approximately 40.2 kilometers of the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road, including pavement upgrades, safety improvements, and the integration of climate adaptation measures. The works will also include the construction of a roundabout at the cul-de-sac junction and the reconstruction of the bridge at Anse Ray. Engineering and construction-related services for the supervision and the certification of the infrastructure works are part of the fourth component of the project. Institutional strengthening is the fifth component of the project. Here, consultancy services for the completion of a road sector policy and strategy and the development and implementation of road safety awareness communication campaign will be undertaken. Capacity building is the sixth component of the project. In this component, there will be consultancy services for the completion of a business development and life skills program for project-affected persons. In the seventh component of the project, there will be establishment of a project management unit in the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Energy. The unit will consist of a project coordinator, procurement officer, environmental monitoring officer, and monitoring and evaluation officer engaged in accordance with the Caribbean Development Bank's procurement procedures, and other positions staffed by officers assigned from the government of St. Lucia. The terms and conditions of the loan are that an interest rate of 4.8% per annum will be payable on the amount of the ordinary capital resource portion unwithdrawn. In addition, a commitment charge is payable at the rate of 1% per annum, also on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn. The loan is repayable in 48 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each first day of January, first day of April, and first day of October of each year, commencing the first due date immediately following the expiration of 5 years after the date of the loan agreement, or on a latter date that the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. Parliament is invited to approve this resolution to the Minister of Finance may borrow for capital expenditure for the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road reconstruction project. It's also fair for me to say, Mr. Speaker, that this is government's portion of its contribution to the project. The majority of the monies, Mr. Speaker, for this project are being provided by DFID, which is the UK Development Agency. As you recall, when Prime Minister Cameron was in office several years ago, he made a commitment of almost £330 million, Mr. Speaker, to the Caribbean. And St. Lucia was one of the beneficiaries of that. I believe our portion was approximately £30 million, Mr. Speaker. Initially, the concept of the then government was for that monies to be used to help start the North-South Highway. But given the time limit on the monies, when we came in, we felt it was more prudent at that time, Mr. Speaker, to assign those monies towards the Millennium Highway and the West Coast Road. Most of us who traverse the Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker, would realize in what poor condition it is. And in fact, that it is absolutely a risk to persons' lives. We also would appreciate that the West Coast Road is one of the most economically generating roads. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? From our tourism sector, the Land and Sea Tour, which allows persons to drive down to Soufrière and take a boat back up, or take a boat down and drive back up, and certainly persons who are going in their own cars, renting cars, that this is the most traversed route. And so this road needs to be upgraded where there are more laybys, but more importantly, that the security, the infrastructural security, integrity of the road is maintained, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that we're now including in all of our infrastructural projects, Mr. Speaker, is the enhancement for climate change and recognizing the severity of these storms. And I think that Thomas, while some years ago, still is in persons' mind that it was only a Category 1 hurricane, but yet it stayed over the island for in excess of 48 hours, and we had almost the equivalent of 3 years of rain in that 48-hour period. And given the volcanic nature of our soil, that it makes St. Lucia extremely vulnerable to landslides. So a critical component to this project, Mr. Speaker, is slope stabilization. and the improvement of drainage along the roads in order to mitigate against any form of major storms. It's important that this road remain open, not only from its economic perspective, but certainly the communities of Ancillary to Canneries and all the way to Columbet and Soufriere. Those persons are very dependent on access to either Vieux Fort or up to Castries, and particularly now that we've opened up the OKEU hospital. So I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the $7 million that we're borrowing really represents government's contribution to a substantially larger project. I will certainly allow the Minister of Infrastructure, I hope, to give a report as to where the project is right now. My understanding is that we've completed, I believe, phase 1, where the feasibility and the designs have been completed, Mr. Speaker. I also believe that the CDB has worked with the Ministry of Infrastructure to provide a short list of contractors. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to be held to the number, but I think it's 5 or 6 contractors that have put in bids for this project. My understanding they'll be making a decision or evaluating the bids this week. And we're really hopeful that we can start seeing construction, particularly on the Millennium Highway, as quickly as possible. We want to take advantage, Mr. Speaker, of the fact that schools are shut right now until September. Also, we don't have our doors open to any tourism, and even if we were to open our doors, we're not expecting that tourists are going to be traversing the island in the initial part like they did before. So it really is to use this opportune time, Mr. Speaker, to commence the work in hand. So on that, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly hopeful that we can get the full support of all parliamentarians on proceeding on this very important project, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount not exceeding the equivalent of US $7,945,000 from the Caribbean Development Bank's Ordinary Capital Resources, OCR, to finance the Millennium Highway and West Coast Reconstruction Project. And be it further resolved that A, the interest is payable at a rate of 4.8% per annum on the amount of the loan withdrawn and outstanding. And B, the commitment charge is payable at a rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the OCR portion unwithdrawn. And C, the loan is repayable in 48 equal or approximately equal and consecutive quarterly installments on each first day of January, first day of April, and the first day of October of each year, commencing on the first due date immediately following the expiration of 5 years after the date of the loan agreement, or on a later due date that the Caribbean Development Bank specifies in writing. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, to the best of my knowledge, sometime last year or year before, we were told, the public of St. Lucia was told, that work would start on the Millennium Highway the next day, and traffic management would have to be put into effect. That was a couple months ago, but as usual, as most promises of this government, that hasn't happened. Prime Minister made a point that the work would have started, I think he said the next day or the day after on the Millennium Highway. But we knew at that time that that could not happen, and it did not happen. Flashing mirrors, Mr. Speaker. Again. Mr. Speaker, if my memory serves me right, this Millennium Highway project had its genesis in July 2015 with a proposal to OFID. OFID is the OPEC Fund for International Development. In 2015, July 2015, a proposal was prepared for OFID to deal with the issues of the Millennium Highway. And in that proposal, Mr. Speaker, there was the project would have been as follows. Repair or resurfacing of the existing highway, an extension to the Millennium Highway, and a cul-de-sac roundabout. 6.76 kilometers of work, Mr. Speaker. And the project proposal at the time, the project would have cost some 34.1 million EC dollars. That was in July 2015. Mr. Speaker, between April the 14th and April the 21st, 2016, an appraisal mission visited St. Lucia from OFID. OFID is the OPEC Fund for International Development. And Mr. Speaker, the appraisal was presented to the personnel from OFID. They walked the highway. They had discussions. It was a 7-day mission. They had discussions with the ministry. And the next month, in May, financial arrangements were complete for the resurfacing and the work on the Millennium Highway. And this government, as per usual, cancelled it. They cancelled the loan from OFID. They cancelled it. Same with the Grocery Highway, because to their mind, 4 years was 40 years, and they would backload all the projects at the end, and as elections are near, they would come forward. Mr. Speaker, the wild talk about roads, roads, roads. One would believe that this government is the only government interested in roads in the country. Mr. Speaker, we knew very well that there were issues relating to roads in Grosile, because Grosile is a new development. Grosile has a number of areas that were just developed, and people went to live there, and many times the people who sold the land did not put the necessary infrastructure, and the government had to put infrastructure. We know that Grosile has an issue as far as roads are concerned. But if you hear this government speak, you would believe that there was never any work done on roads in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. That's what they want to make people believe, that there was never any work done. Mr. Speaker, this government wants to give the impression that they are the roads government. Mr. Speaker, when the time comes, we will detail the work that was done on roads in this country between 2012 and 2016. We will outline it and we will detail it, Mr. Speaker. Because these flashing mirrors of that government, pretending that they are a roads government and they are the one who build roads, Mr. Speaker. Because elections are near, there's a mad rush for roads. Mr. Speaker, we repaired or built 23 bridges. The government of the Labour Party repaired or rebuilt 23 bridges, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you may recall the state of the roads in Castries in 2012. Castries on Bridge Street, the roads in Soufrière, the roads in Vieux-Fort. We redid all these roads, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we did roads in Choiseul. I'm going to outline it at some point. We redid the roads in Soufrière town, in Vieux-Fort town, Mr. Speaker. And that is only for between 2012 and 2016. We're not speaking about 1997 coming down. How we rebuilt all the roads in Kareli, the roads in the north by Beauséjour, all these roads. So this government, this government, Mr. Speaker, believes, pretends they are the government of roads, Mr. Speaker. But we did that, and we did not have $1.50 taxes on gasoline. We did all these roads. But the time will come, Mr. Speaker, when we will outline to the public of St. Lucia the work that we did with roads in this country. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to get back to this OFID loan and this Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister comes and says the Minister of Finance considers it necessary. Considers necessary. I consider it necessary, the Minister of Finance. But he doesn't say the cost of the project. How much will the entire project cost? He says majority of money will come from the loan from DFID. Majority of money. This is not good enough, Mr. Speaker. I have said on several occasions, and I hope that it is clear this morning, this money does not belong to the Minister of Finance. It belongs to the people of St. Lucia. And you can't come in here and talk about money and say majority of money. There is no majority of money. It's dollars and cents. How much it costs? You have to count to the people. It's not your money. It don't belong to you. It belongs to the people of the country. You have to tell us how much, what the project costs. We understand what the taxpayers of St. Lucia are called to pay from the CDB is 8 million. But how much does the project cost? We need to know the total cost of the project, Mr. Speaker. Majority of money, and the minister considers it necessary, is not good enough. We need details, Mr. Speaker. This idea of this top-down situation, I say this, you must do it. My police. That must stop, Mr. Speaker. We can't get in a situation where you are, as if you have a set of people that you just tell them what to do, lost their right to speak. That must stop, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, let us look at the situation regarding that Millennium Highway, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister says that there's going to be a tender, and I'm very happy. And I know the only reason why that's happening, because the CDB, they've mandated that there must be a tender, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, under the FIDIC rules of contract, there is also a situation where there is an evaluation of these tenders. The tenders can be repaired. The tenders board opens the tenders, and these are evaluated by a board, an evaluation board. That evaluation board, Mr. Speaker, this time, that board, I understand, the composition of that board was prescribed by the ministry. That board, the members of that board were prescribed by the ministry, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to find out from the government who are the members, not in terms of names, who are the members, who are the people represented on that evaluation board. Because that evaluation board, is extremely important. We want to find out who is there. Because it's that evaluation board that will make a recommendation to the tenders board for choosing the contractor. That's where the action is. That's where the action is. Who are the members of the evaluation board? Who is represented there? And whether we are clear that the members of the evaluation board it's something that we normally do all the time, or whether there were any changes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it will be not right if I said that the Millennium Highway does not need to be reconstructed. As I said, it was a project that we thought of in 2015. So I have no issues with that, Mr. Speaker. But I still have issues, Mr. Speaker, when, Mr. Speaker, when contractors contractors are being paid. Contractors are being paid. But I'd like to find out whether the public assistance for the populace of this country has been paid. It's just a question whether the public assistance for the people of this country have been paid, Mr. Speaker. And we as ministers of government can chastise public servants in public because they've not paid contractors. Ministers of this government can chastise public servants because they have not paid contractors. I really find out, I'm not saying they have not been paid, I'd like to find out whether the people on public assistance have been paid, Mr. Speaker. I want to ask this question. Mr. Speaker, whether the people on public assistance have been paid or whether the payment have been late and whether the last time they've been paid. Just a question I'm asking. Mr. Speaker, this government pretends that the only way that they can get economic activity is by road construction. They pretend. We have to ask ourselves, Mr. Speaker, there are many ways in which a government can initiate employment and economic activity, not only by construction of major roads where you use tractors and capital equipment and piling on an airport. There are many ways that you can generate economic activity, Mr. Speaker, in the country. There are many ways. The issue of this government is the issue of priorities, because they have been caught with their pants down. They believed that they would have been in power for 40 years. They believed that. So what they did, instead of following the plans that were there, the project, there can be no major difference between the project proposal in July 2015 and now. Instead of looking at that project proposal and developing it and talking to OFID, Mr. Speaker, and talking to the QAT government, this government cancelled it. They cancelled it. Arrogant. I'm the boss. My government. My police. Cancel it, Mr. Speaker. They cancel it. And right now, at the end, COVID was a surprise to them. Because you see, as a friend of mine always say, in the best plans of men and mice, what they planned was to, projects. One of them said, this is the year of execution, projects. But they did not know that there was a higher power. And the higher power saw the evil. And the higher power, Mr. Speaker. So all the plans for execution. So this year would have been a year for execution. All things happen, projects. They were boasting, Mr. Speaker. They did not. And COVID caught them with their pants down. So now there's a mad rush. Projects, Mr. Speaker. And I predicted that there would have been so much stirring of the soil in St. Lucia that the Prime Minister's back would hurt him. And he started turning the soil. Housing in shock estate, this, that. Very soon you'll hear road in this and that. You'll hear pier. You'll hear all kinds of things, Mr. Speaker, because they cannot stop time. And that's their problem now. They're in a mad haste because they realize that next week is June the 6th and they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. They can be my police, civil servants, stop it. They must. By September next year, they must go to the polls. They must. And they can do nothing about it. They can victimize, they can get vexed, they can be arrogant, they can stop demonstrations, they can stop gatherings, they can do whatever they want. They cannot stop September next year for the date for general elections when the people of this country will take a decision on what they have done to them for the last 4 years, Mr. Speaker. And if they come before that, be ready. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell this government that whereas the Millennium Highway needs the work done, they have been too late. That could have happened 3 years ago. Mr. Speaker. But in their haste and their desire to be vindictive and to kill any perceived legacy of this government, they have allowed the people of St. Lucia to suffer for 4 years with that highway instead of continuing the plans that this government started. And I defy them, Mr. Speaker, I defy them to tell me that there was not a project proposal prepared by some of the same staff in the Ministry of Infrastructure now for the Millennium Highway. I defy them, Mr. Speaker. So they can use flashing mirrors and bluff and and so all kind of things. You cannot tell me that there was not a project proposal prepared in 2015 and there was not an president mission between April 14th and 21st, 2016 for that same Millennium Highway. But in your zeal and your quest to front load it in the last month, the year of execution, you've found yourself with your pants down, and now you blame everybody. You blame public servants, you blame the Labour Party, you blame everybody you can, because your best plans have not worked because of the situation, the unfortunate situation of COVID, Mr. Speaker. So you want to blame civil servants, you want to blame the Labour Party, blame the National Trust, blame everybody. All the promises the Prime Minister made, he's blaming everybody now for them, and now the big blame is going to be COVID. That's where the blame, that is what is going to be the blame. So you want to create all kinds of scenarios that is COVID that cause the situation the way it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this government has found itself in its own trap because of its own policies, because of its vindictive nature, because of the nature of trying to stop everything that the Labour Party left. That is why they found themselves in this position. So whereas the Millennium Highway needs to be rehabilitated, it's a little too late because of the actions of this government, Mr. Speaker. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Denrenoff.
Yeah, I wanted to. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the mandate to speak in this Parliament was first given to me by the people of Denrenoff in the general elections of 2011. And in 2016, against the odds, they renewed their confidence in my ability to champion their cause, represent their interest, advocate on their behalf, give expression to their concerns in the Parliament and the wider governance discourse. The people of Grand Riviere, including Montparnasse, Alemon, Tamazo, Dibonnet, Fournier, the people of Grand Ravine and Montpaille, the people of Oulion and Despin, including Montigoubi, Sedini, La Riviere, Montfouet, New Jack, the people of Gadet and Tigadet, the people of La Pelle and La Rissus, including Tilarissus, the people of Richfort, La Belleville and New Village, the people of Belmont and Dernier Riviere, to include Barbara, Montparnasse, Austin Hill, Former-Vicent, Former-Kabou, and Varsity. They, Mr. Speaker, were the ones who gave me the mandate to speak in this Parliament. And it's on their behalf I rise this morning to make a contribution to the debate on the motion that is before us. The government with the worst borrowing record in the history of this country is at it again. Another sitting of Parliament and another opportunity to borrow. This time, $7,945,000 US, Mr. Speaker, which is the equivalent of 213,150 EC dollars. In 4 years, they have borrowed more than $1 billion. In 4 years, Mr. Speaker, this government has borrowed more than $1 billion. And the question has to be asked this morning, what do they have to show for it? Mr. Speaker, I've had 2 terms in the Parliament, and I'm accustomed to debating motions to borrow. Debt is always a point of parliamentary contention. There is always a back and forth. And I recall when I sat for which we came into this chamber to borrow. And Mr. Speaker, you would have thought that upon assuming the reins of government, their posture would have been one where they were going to depart from what they believed that by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration during the years. Having borrowed in excess of $1 billion, the question has to be asked this morning, what do they have to show for traditional forms, grants, in excess of $7 billion in 4 years? I have to ask the question, what do you have to show for it? And just 4 days, 4 days shy of 4 years, Mr. Parliament, and lend support. I'm supposed to adopt a posture where I espouse confidence in the government. I am supposed to stand here today and embrace from OFID who on St. Lucian soil. They came to see for themselves the project for which we were funding, and we were seeking funding and assistance. And they were certain the project was aborted. And today, we are here to borrow. Yes, we recognized the need for repairing that road, but the question is, in the immediate aftermath of COVID, should this project be a priority today? Can it wait? Is this the best use of money now? Is this the best use of money today? $9 million US at a time when our people are crying out for help, at a time when the government is struggling to meet salary commitments to public servants, Mr. Speaker. The question has to be asked. And if somebody on the other side can convince me that this is the best use